Hello everyone, it's Mystic, and welcome back to my library. Today I am going to be giving you my thoughts and review of Pentiment, a narrative, historical fiction, and mystery game by Obsidian Entertainment. You may have heard the name Obsidian, as it is known for other games that I also hear have amazing stories, such as Pillars of Eternity, Fallout New Vegas, and Outer Worlds. So with that kind of resume, I went into Pentiment with pretty high expectations, and spoiler alert, I was not disappointed. Let's start things off with Pentiment's visuals. The graphics of this game have a hand-painted look to them similar to what you would have expected of paintings from the Middle Ages, which is when this game takes place. The color palette tends to be pretty subdued, and you won't find any wild colors like bright pink or neon orange. You will mostly see yellows, reds, blues, the occasional purple, and white and black. One cool thing that I noticed about the art style is that the older a character is in the game, the more worn their avatar appears. Characters that are clearly elderly almost look like their paint is chipping off, which you would expect of older paintings as well. I thought this was a really neat addition to the game and really made me feel like I was looking at a painting or reading a book from the Middle Ages. Another really neat aspect of Pentiment is its use of letterwork and fonts to portray the class and education level of the character speaking. A peasant has a more handwritten script, the printer uses printed letters, scribes use a handwritten script with more flourish than the peasants, humanists use a printed script, and monks use a highly detailed monastic script. Don't worry though, if you have trouble reading these highly detailed fonts, you can switch to easy read fonts, and there is also an option to use voice assist in the accessibility options. On top of the different fonts, Pentiment has a very stylized way of showing when characters are angry or yelling by the use of ink splatters on the page and sometimes the shaking of the page. I was very impressed with the unique way that Pentiment uses graphics and fonts to tell the story. This is really something I've never seen before, and I just thought it was really cool. As there are no voiceovers in Pentiment, the game uses music to really transport the player into this middle-aged themed murder mystery game to great success. All of the music that you find in Pentiment is something that you would probably hear at a Renaissance festival. Later in the game, there is also an incredible use of vocals, all done in what I believe is German to fit the setting. The music was very well done and helped to further immerse me in the gameplay. Pentiment is, for the most part, a point-and-click style game with elements of a choose-your-own-adventure novel. There is no combat, and the player will be using the controls to guide their character around the game and sometimes use their wits to solve puzzles. The puzzles are fairly straightforward, and I didn't really struggle to solve any of them, but this game isn't really meant to be a difficult puzzle solver. The puzzles are there more for the visuals and to further immerse the player, not to stump them for hours on end. There are also some RPG elements to the game as well. When you first meet your character, Andreas Mahler, you can choose where he is from, what he studied, and some other interests of his. These choices will come into play throughout the game, so choose whichever ones you like the most and go from there. Pentiment is also an amazing example of a choices matter game. Every major, and oftentimes minor, decision that you make in this game will have far-reaching effects throughout your playthrough. The game takes place over the course of 25 years, so choose carefully. Perhaps the most important gameplay element, in my opinion though, and probably one that you are all wondering about is, yes, you can pet the dog. And the cat. Several of them, in fact. There's even a Steam achievement for it. Before I get into the story of Pentiment, I do want to caution that this game has a lot of trigger warnings, so please be aware of that before going into it. Some of the triggers that I found are mental illness, rape, murder, death of children, death and slaughter of animals, blood, gore, executions, racism, terrible treatment of women, religious trauma, and religious persecution. I might be missing a few, but these are the ones that stuck out to me the most, so please be aware before buying this game in case any of these might be too much for you. Now let's get into the story, which is always my favorite part of any game that I play. I will be keeping this spoiler-free, so don't worry. Pentiment's story is absolutely phenomenal. As I've already mentioned, it is a historical fiction and murder mystery game set in the Middle Ages. You will be playing as Andreas Mahler, an artist who is currently staying in the town of Tassing, where our story takes place. Tassing is a small town in Bavaria that is under the rule of the local abbey. Religion, specifically Catholicism, plays a huge role in the story, but this game is definitely not preachy or trying to convert its players. In fact, as you play the game, I would say the player will probably come out of it with more skepticism than they had going into the game. As a former Catholic, I appreciated that. As this is a historical fiction game, you will find many references to places, people, and events that occurred during the Middle Ages, and the glossary does a great job of explaining these in case the player is confused or doesn't know about something. The story is told in a series of acts and chapters during the 25-year span that the game takes place in. One thing to note is that the choices that you have Andreas make during the game might affect subsequent acts and chapters, so no two games are going to be exactly the same, and that also means many different game endings. As I also mentioned, this is a murder mystery game. There will be several murders through the game that Andreas will need to solve, but that is not the only mystery affecting Tasting and its people. There is actually an overarching mystery that encompasses the entire 25-year span, and it's up to the player to solve it and figure out what's really going on. I managed to figure things out somewhere in the middle of Act 3, and I was really satisfied with how the game concluded. For the most part, the story kept me completely immersed and intrigued the entire time. In my opinion, Act 3 was a bit slower, but that may have been due to the choices that I made previously. I'm not sure. In conclusion, Pentiment is a fantastic point-and-click choices matter game that I am actually very interested in playing more of so that I can see how other choices affect the gameplay and endings. I would also like to get the rest of the Steam achievements, which is not something I normally do, but would love to do for this game. There's a ton of replayability here, and I highly recommend it to anyone that loves a good mystery. 4.5 books out of 5. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye!